Hey everybody, today it is Tuesday, April 28th, and we're diving into Acts 15 and 16. Now, I'm a little behind my game on all things today. It's just one of those days. I woke up with a headache. Have you ever had that? You're just kind of derailed and slower moving. So, this is later in the day. It's actually dinner time, and I'm actually in the middle of cooking. So, I'm making instant pot chicken burrito bowls, and I want to be cooking while I'm sharing today's study with you. So, hi Miles, and Miles is outside playing. It's a beautiful day. What you doing, bud? You okay?
I am.
Come say hi.
Who is he?
Look, it's our church friends. We're saying hi.
Hi.
Tell me, what were you gonna say?
I don't know. I was just coming in to get water.
Ooh, that's a good thing.
Uh-huh.
Yep, cool. All right, do you know where your water is?
Yeah.
All right, he's gonna get water, and we are gonna dive into these burrito bowls and Acts 15 and 16. Now, this is what I was thinking. Well, first, I already have my chicken cut up in there, adding some taco seasoning. See, the church, they all still had lives. They had to eat. They had to care for kids. They had to go through the daily rhythms of life while also serving God and being on mission for God. I think we forget that sometimes. I think it's very easy to just almost dehumanize these people in a way. You know, they are almost like almost like celebrities or these mythical beings, but they were real people with real lives, with families and responsibilities and heartache and troubles and hardships and busy schedules and active kids and all of that. And then we see how the church also deals with significant events such as what happens in Acts 15. Now, this is the Jerusalem Council, is what it's called. It's kind of the first recorded church conference, you could say. Almost like a consistory meeting or like a synod, if you consider our actual church background. It's this big meeting where they get together. And it's the first one, but we know it certainly will not be the last one. And so they get together because there were concerns and issues over what was happening in the church. Specifically, they were discussing Gentile membership within the church. You see, the issues were raised by the Pharisee kind of branch of the church in Jerusalem. They were criticizing the mission to the Gentiles. They were, I guess you could say, they believed for Gentiles to be Christians, they had to first become Jewish and follow the Jewish customs and laws of that time. And that includes circumcision. That's kind of what the argument circulated around. But at the heart of it was the idea that to become Christian, you had to first become Jewish. So these concerns are raised, and they meet together to discuss these things. And it's kind of an interesting picture because Peter gets up to defend Paul. Paul, of course, was doing a lot of missionary work to the Gentiles. And so Peter gets up and he has this wonderful defense and this careful kind of exposition of what is going on and why the Gentiles maybe should not have to become Jewish first. And so then we get an important line in verse 7. You see, it says in verse 7, after there had been much debate. Now, after there had been much debate, you see, when we read this, we think, oh, Peter just gets up, says some passionate words, and people are like, okay, let's do that. No, it was a discussion with multiple viewpoints being shown, with everyone's voices being heard. There's much debate. For anyone who's been to synod, they've experienced that before. And here's the deal. It's an important theological issue that they're discussing. And it's in the very fragile early history of the church. So the reality is they went about it in a careful way. And they sought reason and to be thoughtful in their process during this. And they also based it on scripture, which is highly important. This isn't just people's feelings. It is a scripture-based decision. And now I just think this is interesting. it's really easy to lose track of time in the Bible, isn't it? But Peter, he speaks and refers back to his witness to the Gentiles, to Cornelius, if you remember that. That was just in our last video last week. And the weird thing is, that was actually about 10 years ago in the story of Acts. 10 years have passed. And we lose sight a lot of the time in the Bible. But 10 years, I mean, Jesus' ministry was 10 years have gone on since that story we read last week. And it led to this moment in the council. So this issue has persisted because the mission to the Gentiles has persisted for 10 years. And so it's something that has been growing in those who did not agree with this viewpoint. So Peter comes to the idea that one doesn't need to become Jewish to become Christian. No, you don't. He says you don't need to uphold the old laws because Jesus came and he's the fulfillment of the law. And he established, what did he establish but his new covenant, the new law, you could say, through his death and resurrection. Therefore, making it unnecessary to follow the Jewish customs and rituals, including circumcision, to be considered a Christian and be part of the church. Now, James, he's the brother of Jesus. He kind of comes up with an agreement, a recommendation on how to proceed. And his recommendation is that Jewish Christians, those that were Jewish and became Christian and perhaps still follow those ceremonial laws and whatnot, as well as the Gentile Christians, should have a fellowship together. Kind of an agreement that Gentiles do not need to follow these customs, and Gentiles also don't need to look down or judge the Jewish ones for upholding those customs still. It was kind of a fellowship decision between those things. And so they came to this agreement to uphold the unity of the church, which is highly important because this could have been an enormous divide in the church, a giant schism, you could say. And if that were to have happened, if you think about it, the ministry to the Gentiles would have essentially ended. And it's hard to see how it all would have worked out. But God, in his sovereignty, made a way forward. So that's a really quick, simplistic overview. And yeah, it was a crucial moment in the history of the church, and indeed the future of the church. And yet they handled it wisely. They handled it with care. They did it with multiple voices being heard and seeking God and Scripture to come to a grace-filled solution, which is really a model for all of us to follow in any kind of disagreement. Now, to update you on my burrito bowls here, I had my chicken with my taco seasoning, put some black beans and corn in there. Salsa, I had like 2 half can or jars or whatever, of salsa, so I combined those. A little hot sauce, salt and pepper, and now a cup of rice and a cup of chicken broth. I mixed it all together. The rice I kind of just make sure is submerged in there, otherwise it won't cook right. Then you put it in the Instant Pot. We love ours, by the way. We use it quite a lot. Lifesaver for a young family. And we put it in for 10 minutes. I usually do about 12 minutes, actually, because first couple times we cooked it, the rice wasn't cooked all the way. So I'm just now pressing the rice into the Instant Pot, and then that will be good to go. We're actually making this for our friends who recently moved in the neighborhood. We met them in the neighborhood, just had a baby, and no one can see them because that's our reality right now. So we are dropping some food off on their doorstep for them. All right, so we talked about Jerusalem Council. Here's the thing. 2 more points, and then we'll be done. I have to find my Instant Pot lid. Okay, we found it. So, the next point is that James, brother of Jesus, being the one to come up with the resolution, it's a little bit revealing. You see, James was known as a gentleman who really upheld the Jewish laws and traditions and customs. He held to them closely. He was known for that. And so him proclaiming that Peter is right in his deduction that you don't need to become Jewish in order to be a Christian was huge. And that he came up with a solution on the way forward it kind of shows that he's almost speaking more for the majority of Jewish Christians at that time. It shows that those that came forward with the complaint, they were more of the outliers of the group. Still loud, still a significant part of the church, but it kind of shows that they were more on the fringe. Now, gracefully, thankfully, there we go. Their hardline view on this, it was rejected, and the mission of God could continue forward. The reality is, you and I both know that it's often the loudest voices that we give the most attention to in our lives. And yet we also know the loudest voices are not always in the right place. Their hearts aren't in the right place always. Discernment, wisdom, grace, and holding on to the mission of God is dearly important when navigating our lives. And the final thing, right after the Jerusalem Council, we get brutal news that Paul and Barnabas have this sharp disagreement, and they choose to part ways and separate. These are the two that have been on mission together. They were partners in ministry, and they have this sharp disagreement is the language used. You could say heated argument if you wanted, and they choose to part ways. Now, this happens right after the Jerusalem Council when they work out a thing of unity, and now Paul and Barnabas are unable to. And yet, because here's the beauty of it, God, he took that hardship, and out of it, in his sovereignty, he doubled the labor. He doubled the work because Paul went, Barnabas went, and together they did more separate than they could have together. And then, in addition, we have John Mark, who went with Barnabas, and we had Silas, who went with Paul, that went on to have significant ministries themselves. So God took that sharp disagreement and still used it and worked it for the good of his mission and his people, showing that God is the one in control, who has a plan, and who does work these things out for good. So just a few reflection questions for you today. What disagreements in your life are you navigating right now, and how can you infuse it with God's grace and with scripture and with compassion, seeking understanding together with those people like they did in the Jerusalem Council? And then the second question is more reflect on your own experience in church or at work when you've had meetings and whatnot. When there are disagreements, how do you seek God in those disagreements for it to be worked for good instead of for ill and division? How can you work it together for unity instead of division? And if it goes to division, is it done in a peaceful, grace-filled way that God may bless for the furtherment of his work and kingdom? Just some things for you to ponder today. This was a little more scrambled than normal, but that is our real life. And so I'm honored to share it with you. Thanks for spending this time with me. It's been Cooking with Kevin as well as Acts with Kevin. So have a wonderful day. I'll see you all on Thursday as we dive into our next two chapters. Thanks, everyone.